So today we're decoding Tom Cruise. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. You picture him sprinting away from explosions, right? Hanging off the side of airplanes. But behind all those crazy stunts is actually a deeply obsessed cinematography nerd. Seriously, we're gonna dive into his hidden masterclass in filmmaking, and it is absolutely fascinating.
Okay, let's dive into this. He has this one quote, "I just want movies to look like movies." It sounds almost too simple, right? But this single, completely unpretentious quote is actually the foundational philosophy driving his entire approach to visual tone. You know, we live in this era where algorithms and crazy high-definition clarity can sometimes make a massive blockbuster look more like a sterile video game. But Cruise, he's on this relentless pursuit of that intangible, organic magic that actually defines classic cinema. He totally gets that getting a film to actually look like a movie today requires way more deliberate effort, technical skill, and just relentless testing than it literally ever did in the past.
And to achieve that cinematic holy grail, well, you've got to surround yourself with absolute masters. Just think about the heavy-hitting cinematographers he's worked with. We're talking absolute legends, guys like Janusz Kaminski and Robert Elswith. But here's the really fascinating part about how he actually collaborates with them. Take his recent work with Emmanuel Chivo Lubezki. Cruise noticed that Chivo and directors like Alejandro G. Iñárritu kind of grew up together, right? They developed this incredibly unique visual language. When Cruise steps into that kind of environment, it's never a rigid, preconceived plan. No way. Instead, they're actively exploring and discovering the visual tone together. He's right there in the trenches, studying the director's eye, studying the cinematographer's eye. He even sits his fellow actors down, like he did on Top Gun Maverick, to walk them through the exact specific lenses they're using, just to make sure everyone completely understands the editorial tone they're going for. Because if you think about it, Cruise's career is literally a walking timeline of modern cinematic history. He was right there at the absolute pinnacle of traditional film in the 80s, working under those massive, sweltering arc lights. Then he's pushing boundaries in 1994 on Interview with the Vampire, using these early night glow lights to get that incredibly unique, soft, nocturnal look. Fast forward to 2004, and he's right on the bleeding edge of the digital revolution with Michael Mann's Collateral. And then, of course, Top Gun Maverick, where they are pushing the ultra-high-tech Rialto camera system while simultaneously reviving the classic VistaVision format. He's so dedicated to finding the exact right medium for a story that, get this, for Edge of Tomorrow, he literally had to help open up film labs just to develop the celluloid they were shooting on. I mean, that is true dedication.
And all of this really reveals a massive divide between Hollywood's assumptions and Cruise's actual reality. See, when digital cameras first hit the scene, studio executives were thrilled. The myth going around was, great, digital is going to save us so much money, and hey, if there's a mistake, whatever, we'll just fix it in post-production. But Cruise, he was the guy in the room pushing back. He was telling everyone, no, this isn't going to save money if we actually do it right. His reality is that shooting digital is incredibly complex. It requires an immense amount of deliberate skill to make it look cinematic. You can't just point, shoot, and rely on some computer wizard later to make it look good. Which brings us to this absolutely powerful mantra of his. We're not going to fix it in post. We're going to fix it right now. Think about it. When you go into digital color timing in post-production, you essentially have the power to change every single primary color. You can make a scene warmer, cooler, greener, whatever you want. But Cruise argues that this infinite freedom is actually a trap. If you rely on changing everything later, you totally lose perspective on the actual movie set. The crew gets completely overwhelmed by choices, and they disconnect from the reality of the scene right in front of them. To make a movie actually feel real, you have to commit to the look through your physical tools, right there on the day of the shoot. And that commitment means picking the perfect format, no matter how unconventional it might seem. For Top Gun Maverick, they didn't just grab the newest, flashiest digital camera off the shelf. No, they literally ran side-by-side tests of 65mm film against VistaVision. Now, VistaVision is a high-resolution widescreen format that was invented way back in the 1950s. They ultimately chose VistaVision, but they didn't even stop there. They went ahead and actively developed custom lenses specifically to couple with that format. Cruise's goal was to make VistaVision look like something audiences had literally never seen before. It's that level of microscopic, obsessive attention to detail that elevates your standard summer blockbuster into an actual visual masterpiece. But even with the absolute best digital cameras in the world, Cruise identified a persistent issue. Now, digital technology is incredibly helpful, right? It gives you massive depths of field at night, and you can shoot these incredibly long takes without having to stop and reload film magazines. But the problem? The problem is that digital glass, the modern lenses attached to these cameras, is just too clean. It creates an image that feels almost clinical. And Cruise realizes that modern audiences are, on a subconscious level, really craving authenticity. They want an image that feels human, not something flawlessly generated by a microchip. So how does he solve this? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. He turns to old glass. Cruise is actually famous for hunting down handmade vintage camera lenses, specifically these classic C-series lenses from the 1970s, and he literally jerry-rigs them onto state-of-the-art modern digital cameras. He will go into rental houses and specifically demand lenses that were cut and assembled by hand decades ago. Why? Because it deliberately introduces these subtle, beautiful imperfections right back into that flawless digital frame. Just listen to the passion he has when he talks about this. He says, it has character. You can feel the person that made it in there almost. That organic feel, that is his secret ingredient. By filtering these cutting-edge digital sensors through vintage handmade glass, he's basically bridging the gap between modern technology and classic cinema. He is literally taking the coldness out of the digital age and injecting soul right back into the light before it ever even hits the camera sensor. It's amazing. But lenses and cameras are ultimately just one piece of a much larger puzzle. For Cruise, filmmaking is this deeply holistic production. You can't just type visual tone on a script page and expect it to magically appear. You have to discover it and build it across every single department. It starts on day one with the production designer establishing the exact color palettes for the sets and the wardrobe. Then, the cinematographer has to light that set and select the specific lenses to perfectly capture those exact colors. And if the hair and makeup department isn't adjusting to the way modern sensors process less light, the whole illusion falls apart. Everything, and I mean everything, must align perfectly to maintain that visual tone throughout the entire picture. And to get all those massive departments aligned, it all comes down to this really simple three-word philosophy: prepare, deliberate, surprise. Cruise demands an absolute extreme amount of testing before a single frame is ever shot. They're testing the lenses, testing the development, testing the lighting, over and over. But he doesn't do this to make the shoot rigid or boring. Actually, it's the exact opposite. He prepares and deliberates so extensively, specifically to allow for magic to happen. He loves the surprises. He loves that old school tradition of sitting down at the end of the day with all the department heads to watch the rushes, the raw footage from the day. You might have an idea of what it's going to look like, but because of all that intense organic preparation, there is always this beautiful, unexpected surprise waiting on the screen. So, drawing from his decades at the very top of the industry, Cruise offers this incredible masterclass advice for the next generation of filmmakers and creators. First, you have to study the history and the evolution of your tools. You need to understand how film speed, grain, and massive innovations like the Steadicam fundamentally changed the language of movies. Second, really understand the limits of what you can actually do in post-production color timing. Don't let infinite choices paralyze your perspective. Third, and this is a big one, never, ever adopt a fix-it-in-post mentality. Make the hard choices right there on the set. And finally, test constantly. If you want a very specific look, you have to relentlessly experiment with your lenses and your lighting to figure out exactly how to achieve it in the physical world. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. And this applies whether you're making a $200 million blockbuster, shooting a quick video for social media, or honestly working on any creative project in your life. Take a hard look at the tools you use every single day. In an age where software promises to just fix all of our mistakes with the click of a single button, are you making lazy decisions? Or are you, like Tom Cruise, taking the craft seriously? Are you understanding your tools deeply enough to inject true character and real soul into your work? Let that question sit with you the next time you sit down to create. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.